Hey everybody, Charles for HumbleMechanic.com, and today I'm taking your questions on modifying high mileage cars, DSG services, coolant, and more. This is episode 140 of the Humble Mechanic Podcast. All right, to get a question on a show like this, email me, Charles at HumbleMechanic.com, and be sure to put question for Charles in the subject. That's what I use to filter out these emails from all the other emails that I get. Also, if you can, ask your question right at the top, mash the enter button a few times, and then give me all the details that I might need to answer the question. That really does help me answer the question better for you guys, rather than reading a whole paragraph and trying to pick out the question. So awesome job to everyone that sent me these questions. Also, if you don't hear your question or see me answer your question on a show like this, you can check out the quick videos playlist on YouTube. That'll have even more of the questions that don't necessarily make it to these shows, but are still fantastic questions that I think can provide a lot of value to not only the person that asks the question, but to everyone else as well. All right, before we get into the show, let's talk about the sponsor of the day, which is CRP Automotive. CRP deals in a ton of OE maintenance and repair parts, timing belt kits, suspension components, and even fluids. In fact, they make the factory DSG fluid for Volkswagen and Audi. So check them out at crpautomotive.com. And speaking of DSG fluid, that's actually what our first question is about today. Andy asks, hey, I just took my GTI in for service at a high-rated local shop. On the bill after picking it up, I noticed there was only 4 liters of the Pentacin DSG fluid. Should I be alarmed that the transmission is underfilled? Also, I noticed that they use a Vico filter kit. I've seen a few threads about them leaking from the O-ring. Is this anything I should worry about or just keep an eye on the leaks? So, 2 questions. Do we worry about the 4 liters versus what most places would probably bill out as 5 liters, even though the actual level kind of falls somewhere in the middle? Probably not. I probably wouldn't worry too terribly much about it. Odds are they did fill the fluid level correctly. Sometimes it's weird with parts because let's say it does take, let's use this example instead. Let's say whatever the fill level is 5.1 liters. A lot of times shops will only bill out 5 liters, and then that extra comes from either extra from another service or somewhere else. That's kind of how we do it at my dealership. If something takes 5.1 liters, it feels really uncomfortable to bill someone for a full 6 liters and then not give them the difference is basically kind of how I see it in my mind. So that's probably what they've done. They've probably give the technician 5 liters, only charge out 4. Maybe they adjust the price of the 4 liters to compensate for that extra half liter or so. I wouldn't worry too terribly much about it, but what you can do is give them a call and ask them, because maybe they are only putting 4 liters in. You know, there's no way for any of us to know unless we actually check the fluid level of the DSG fluid. And I'll link up a video that I did on how to do exactly that, where we use Pentacin fluid and an OE kit. So you can check that out if you want to see kind of our process as a technician on how we do that. Now, as far as leaking, the only thing you're going to be able to do really is either keep an eye on it or replace the seal for the DSG filter. If it were me, I would keep a really close eye on it. You can kind of see the filter looking from the top down. So you're going to look just to the passenger side of the battery, straight down. And on the GTIs, you can actually see it quite a bit better than you can on the diesels. The diesels are a little bit more cloudy, which is what that video is done on. So keep an eye on the leak. If you're really worried about it, man, get another seal. It's an easy thing to do. You can follow that same video that I just mentioned like 400 times and only do the seal instead of doing the entire service. So it's up to you. I'd give them a call if I was really worried about it, but honestly, it's probably nothing that you're going to need to worry about. All right, next one comes from Angel. Can I use regular coolant in my 91 GTI, or do I have to get the correct G-Series coolant? I'm replacing the radiator, water pump, and hoses in my GTI. I had purchased some coolant a while back and have not used it. Since I'm not 100% sure that I drained all the original coolant, I don't want to introduce something that could create an issue. All right, so very interesting question. This is going to be like practical versus by the book. So let's go by the book first. Yes, you have to use the G coolant that Volkswagen says, because that is the right coolant, that is the right coolant detergent packages, that has all the right goodness, right, in the coolant to make your car happy, make the engine happy, all the stuff in the cooling system happy. I did a video all about coolant with Mark from Pentison that you're more than welcome to check out. It's way hot, like intense coolant stuff. So that may answer some of your like really deep questions. Watching that video, I'll be sure to link that up for you. Now let's move to the real world. We have a 1991. That's what, 27 years old, something like that. You guys do the math. It's an old car, so we got a really old car. Odds are it doesn't have the right G-rated coolant in it now, unless someone has maintained that car like perfectly at some point in its life. It's probably had the wrong coolant put in it. Now, the older generations aren't nearly as sensitive as the newer stuff is going to be. The new stuff is very sensitive to coolant and very sensitive to coolant mixing. The older stuff isn't really quite as sensitive. So to me, you know, I want to say get the right stuff because that's the right answer. But let's move into the real world because we're probably doing a lot of other things wrong with our coolant anyway. We're probably not using deionized water. We probably have a car that's had, like I said, the wrong coolant in it at some point in its life. If this were my car, I would probably flush it all out with just regular tap water. I would probably put the G series coolant in it because that would make me feel better about it. Would I really give you a hard time if you didn't do that and you just use regular coolant? I probably wouldn't. I would probably say you're going to be okay. Just remember that you need to keep an eye on this stuff. And, you know, in 10,000 miles, if you start to see some weird buildup, got to get it flushed, got to get it flushed. You know, you're replacing the water pump. You may want to look at what the warranty criteria is for replacing that water pump and replacing that radiator. If they say you have to do a coolant flush and you have to use this exact coolant in order for there to be any warranty, well, you bet your butt I'd be using that coolant because I wouldn't want to sacrifice a warranty just to use a $20 bottle of coolant that I already have. So it's going to be up to you. If it were my car, personally, I would put the right stuff in it. It would just, if for no other reason, you know, take away all the badness that some coolants have and how mixing them can be a problem. It would make me feel better knowing that I had the exact right coolant in my car rather than worrying about maybe degradation of coolant or wear on parts or, you know, improper lubrication on parts. I would just go ahead and get the right stuff. So that is going to be my official answer. All right, next one comes from Frazier. It's about moving jobs. Hey man, just looking for some advice. I want to get to master tech level with VW. Now I've been offered a job at my local VW dealership. I'm really looking for progression. I've served my time on light vehicles, then went to serve my time on heavy vehicles like buses. Now there isn't much progression routes in my current job, so I was wondering what you think on the subject. Awesome question. So before we get deep into the master tech thing, there's something I need to say, and this is not taking away anything from someone that is a master certified whatever, right? Ford, Chevy, Nissan, Subaru, I don't care. I worked really hard to become a master certified technician. The truth is, you can be a master certified technician and still not be a good technician, a great technician. You could be maybe a mediocre diagnostic technician. All that is really a piece of paper that says you worked hard and did a bunch of curriculum. Now, there's experience that comes along with that, and you got to put the work in to get there. So, by and large, I think most of the technicians in the world, right, the whole world that are master certified, whatever, are great technicians and have worked really, really hard to get there because this is not easy. Let's walk through the process of being a Volkswagen technician. There's, I don't know, 26 classes that you have to actually go to a learning center to take. Anywhere from 2-day classes to 4-day classes. You know, everything. It's all of it, right? Electrical, engine, diagnostic, diagnostic 2, engine management 2, auto trans, manual trans, hybrid, body control systems, convertibles, you know, the list is, like I said, 20-something classes. So you have to go to all those classes and pass all those classes. And then what you have to do is take a series of tests, 5 tests, basically on those classes. But, you know, for someone like me that went to all these classes over 8 years, and then at the end of it, they're like, here's your test, Charles. You know, it's not really paper, it's all online, but it was a struggle. These tests are hard. These tests are hard anyway. And now imagine spacing out all this learning over your career, and it gets really challenging. So it's a hard road. There's people that want to take away from what that really does mean And I understand that. I get it, I guess. But as someone that has worked really hard to achieve that goal, the goal that I had from day one of being a master technician, it's a little insulting, but I also understand where they're coming from. Whether it's, I don't know, jealousy, or they're in a bad shop and they'll never get there. Maybe they're just flat out not that good at being a technician. I don't know. So be prepared for that. Be prepared for well, you're the master technician, you should know how to fix it. No matter what the problem is, you'll probably get some of that. I was lucky, I work in a really good shop, and I didn't get too much of that, at least to my face anyway. The service advisor really more than anything kind of tried to throw that in my face, which pisses me off, but whatever. It's a long journey, it's a worthwhile journey, it's a hard journey. I wouldn't go into a job and not want to have the goal of being at the top level that I could achieve in that job. You're not going to be a professional football player without the goal of winning a Super Bowl. At some point, that has to be your goal. So props to you, man, for working hard. Good job putting in, the work on buses, the work on light cars. I will tell you that Volkswagen is a much different world than those worlds, but you've got a lot of other experience, which I think will lend itself very well to being a great technician. So understand that getting to be a master technician is also highly dependent on your location in the country. We're 6 hours away from the closest training center, which is why that took a lot longer than it really should have for me and my guys in the shop. A lot of us should have been master certified way, way, way long ago, but because of our region and our location in the country, we were just so far from a training center that you really only got to go once or twice a year at the most. It's really hard to get all those classes done, only going a few times a year. So good luck, man. Hey, when you get that master certification, let me know. And I don't know, I'll throw you a high five or something, because we need a lot. We need all of the good quality technicians, not only at Volkswagen, not only Audi, but across the country, guys working hard to achieve those high levels. All right, next one comes from Z. Hey, Charles, I have a 2010 GTI with 45,000 miles on it. I have done oil changes on the car every 5,000 miles. While it had free service, I would either pay for or do the intermediate oil changes myself. I was watching the ASDAP show, and Paul seemed to be a stickler for the specified oil weight 5W40. When I have done my own oil changes, I've used Mobil 0W40 European spec oil that adheres to VW502 specification. I live in Southern California, and it's never extremely hot or extremely cold. Is this a big deal? I'm especially concerned because I have an extended warranty and don't want this to affect it, especially if I have the dreaded timing chain tensioner thing happen. P.S. Just how prevalent is the timing chain tensioner thing? My car is a late 2010. The 2011s were coming in when I got my car. Okay, let's talk about the oil thing first. Z, good question. Should you use 0W40 or 5W40? Well, this is going to cause debate no matter what I answer, right? Because there are people that are going to say 0W40 is better. There are people that are going to say 5W40 is better, and you shouldn't use whatever the other one is that you don't think is better. I'm going to go with what the manufacturer recommends. I would use the 5W40 in my car, period. That's what I would do. I'm not saying that's a better option. I'm not saying it's a worse option. I'm saying there's a lot more research and engineering that went into saying this is the proper oil for your engine than a lot of people on the internet have done, right? Not saying they're wrong, not saying that they don't have valid points to why maybe 0W40 from Mobil 1 may be better than 5W40 from Castrol, which I think is what the oil cap says on your car. I would, man, to avoid any stress, just for that alone, so you didn't have to worry about it, kind of like the coolant thing, I would just use 5W40. Plain and simple, that's what I would do. Now, am I going to beat you up for using 0W40? No. I mean, not really. I would really recommend, though, go ahead and use what the manufacturer says. That way, if there is an issue with the warranty, you got your receipt. Look, I used exactly what Volkswagen recommended. This is my receipt for my oil. It was 5W40. My timing chain tensioner exploded. You can't blame me for not doing maintenance on my car. Now, you're ahead of the game because you're doing them every 5, which is awesome. And if I owned a TSI, that's what I'd be doing too. But if for no other reason than to avoid any hassle with anybody down the road, I would just go ahead, use the 5W40. I think Mobil 1 makes great oil. I used Mobil 1 years ago in all my Hondas. That's what I used. I used either Pennzoil now or Castrol now, And that is merely a product of that's what we have at the dealership. So it's really easy for me to just go, hey, give me five quarts, or pump the oil from the wall, which is how our oil's set up in the shop. So that's why I use primarily Pennzoil at this point. I think I did put Castrol in the Tiguan just because that's what Volkswagen pays for. But man, I don't really think you'd notice anything different either way, right? The truth of the matter is, I think you would probably, especially where you live in California, you're probably going to be fine with either one. Happy as a clam, car will be perfect, no issues regarding that. But officially, just use the right stuff, the stuff that Volkswagen recommends. It has the potential to save you a heck of a lot of headache if you do ever have a warranty claim. And as far as how prevalent the timing chain tensioner failure is, man, that's a tough call. That TSI engine is in a ton of cars, and we've seen a good amount of failures. I think the aftermarkets are really seeing more than the dealerships are because people are realizing this is going to be an expensive repair. I don't have hard numbers that say 1 in 4 will definitely fail, or 1 in 3, or 1 in 7. I don't know that information. I know we service a ton of them, and this isn't like an intake manifold failure where there is you're pretty much guaranteed this is going to fail at some point. This is a lot lower number than something like that. So I don't know the numbers, right? Don't have the facts on it, but it doesn't feel like there's quite as many as maybe the internet makes it out to be. The problem is they are out there, and it's really expensive to get it fixed if it does fail. Now, it's not cheap to replace the tensioner, but the way that I've really started to look at this, if you have a 10 GTI and you're worried about the tensioner, one, I did a video on how to check it, so you can look at it and see which one you have. No problem. It'll take you like 20 minutes at the most. Take you longer to put the car up in the air than it will to actually look for the tensioner. So I'll be sure to link that video up. You can just check it yourself. Think about it like a timing belt. Think about it like a one-time timing belt. If this were a BPY, right, the earlier gen TSI, you'd be putting a timing belt on it. The prices are about the same. Think of it as a one-time timing belt job. It's not awesome, but call it $1,000 to replace this timing chain tensioner is way better than buying a new engine, buying a new cylinder head, putting valves in a car. No matter what repair you do after valves are bent, this way is going to be cheaper. So go ahead and use the right oil. And I wouldn't necessarily forget about the timing chain tensioner, but I would check it to see which one I had and then kind of form a plan from there. All right, got time for one more. This one comes from Matthew, and it's about tuning a GTI with higher mileage. Hey Charles, I've been wanting to get a stage 1 flash tune on my car for some time now, but can't decide if it was okay or not because of my higher mileage. I have an 07 GTI with almost 120,000 miles. Let me know your thoughts, and thank you so much. Love all your videos, and keep up the amazing work. Normally I cut that end off, but Matthew, thanks for the kind words, man. I really do appreciate that. So, tuning a high mile GTI. Before we put one performance part on this car, Matthew, timing belt. Get it done. Get it done. You're about to anyway, but if you haven't had a timing belt done, do it immediately. Now, next step, what we need to do is we need to evaluate the health of the engine, right? We can do things like a compression test, a leak down test, and see if our cylinders are even. We can do all kinds of stuff. Visual inspection really is going to be your friend here. Do we have any leaking oil? Do we have any coolant hoses that are maybe showing wear? Do we have a boost leak that's so small that maybe we're not tripping a check engine light? We want to make sure this engine is as healthy as it can possibly be before we start trying to make it go faster than it already does. So we want to, again, timing belt. We might want to pull the high pressure fuel pump and inspect the high pressure fuel pump lobe, or follower, the follower for the high pressure fuel pump. There we go, Charles. And see what that looks like. And honestly, if you're going to take it out, just put another one in. But we can inspect the camshaft as well and see if there's any wear on the lobe. Basically, my point with this is you can modify a high mile car. I don't have any problem with that because it's not really much different than a moderately miled up car, right? If this car had 60,000 miles, we would be having almost the exact same conversation that we're having now. The only difference is I wouldn't be harping on the timing belt nearly as much at 60 as I would at 120. We want to make sure this car is as healthy as possible, not only just in the engine, running as good as we can possibly get it before we put a tune on it. We also want to make sure that everything else is okay. What do our brakes look like? What does our suspension look like? Do we have busted axle boots? And this extra torque is going to cause more stress on the entire car. We're going to run into more problems, period. A good guideline is you're going to always run into more problems on a modified car than you are on a stock car, for the most part. Once we get in and start tinkering and tweaking and doing things, it's generally more stress on the car. We lower a car, it's going to be more stress on it. We put bigger brakes on it, it may be more stress on it. So think with that mindset that anything I do is probably going to cause more stress. This is okay, right? It's not a horrible thing, but we just want to be aware of that when we modify cars. They tend to require a little more attention than maybe a stock car would necessarily. So go through your entire car, not just the engine. We want to start there. We want to make sure it's healthy. Timing belt, spark plugs, you name it, all the maintenance stuff. Fuel filter, air filter, put a pollen filter in it. Do a brake flush. Make sure all that stuff is good. Make sure our tires are good. Make sure our suspension is good. Our brakes are good before we start modifying cars. But dude, if your car is in good shape, rock and roll, go to it. I feel even more comfortable on a car with a manual transmission than I would necessarily a DSG. One of the reasons why I haven't done anything with my Passat is it's an automatic. One, I'm not going to get a whole lot out of, let's say, tuning it like you're doing. Not nearly what you're going to get from your GTI. But two, I worry about the stress on the transmission. Manual transmission, I'm not worried about it. Worst case for the most part is I'm going to put a clutch in it and a release bearing. And at some point that turns into a maintenance job anyway, so I'm not worried about that. A DSG, I'm a little more worried about, but not really. I would probably still go and do it. Remember that stage 1 is not stage 3 plus, right? We're not putting a turbocharger this big on the car and hoping to get 600 horsepower out of it. We're just tweaking our numbers a little bit, changing our engine management strategy, and squeaking out a little bit more power. Personally, I don't know how you've driven the car this long without a tune on it, because it's just night and day difference on your car between tuned and untuned. I'm just kind of kidding with you here, because that would be my first drive if I bought a GTI, is immediately to go get it tuned. But man, that's a great question. Again, make sure that all of the maintenance is up to date. Everything is in tip-top shape before we start putting these go-fast parts on. And understand that the more we modify our car, the more reliability tends to go down, the more maintenance and attention the car really is going to need to make sure that it stays healthy. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. If you have any questions or comments, post it in the comments section below. Hey, if you like the video, throw it a thumbs up on YouTube. I really do always appreciate that. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the blog, and obviously right here on YouTube. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.